Welcome back. You're still watching Finweek Money Matters. Remember, this is the show that helps you manage your finances. Just a few years ago, the growth in telecoms growth or group revenue, profits and share prices was rampant, and the pace was seemingly unstoppable. But today, things don't look as peachy as the struggle to maintain growth momentum in a world of slowing voice revenue growth, falling data tariffs and squeezed margins. Now, Vodacom's latest results released this Monday sum up just that problem. The demand for data continues to soar, and data revenue growth is outstripping that of voice. But revenue from data is growing at a significantly slower rate than the increase in data traffic. Joining us to discuss the challenges that is faced by the telecoms industry, we've got Arthur Goldstuck, Managing Director of World Wide Worx, and Jan Vermeulen, Technology Journalist at MyBroadband. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Lots that I've said up top there, so let's make sense of it. So the bottom line is what in terms of the challenges? We've got data revenue going up, we've got voice going down, the issue being?
I guess the challenge is more the expectation of investors than the performance of the business itself, because although it's slow growth, 2 to 3% growth annually is not great, but if you consider that it's a fairly mature industry and it's reached saturation levels in terms of voice, then the fact that it's still growing is good news, but investors demand much faster growth. The real problem lies in the set of returns from data versus the set of returns from voice. So voice has dropped 6% to around $23 billion for the past year, whereas data has gone up 27% to around $17 billion. So a lot faster growth. In fact, it's growing rapidly, whereas voice is declining,
Yes.
but still not contributing as much as voice. But the fact that it contributes 40% of revenue and is still growing at those kind of levels tells you that it's going to outstrip voice. If not this year, then certainly next year we'll see data revenue outstripping voice revenue. The problem for a lot of observers is that the growth of data revenue has slowed down dramatically from 88% or so down to 27%. But that's still serious growth. 27%, if you're coming off a high base, is massive. So it's really a case of, I would say, sheer greed that people have got used to that massive growth in returns, and now they're disappointed it's only 27%.
Only
That's
27,
crazy.
but
It's
from like
incredibly healthy
from
growth.
over 80. Arthur, let's bring Jan into this conversation. Jan, why the decline though?
Why the decline in voice?
Why the decline in data? I mean, in terms of not being as significant as it was before.
Oh yeah, in terms of the revenue.
That's right.
It's got to do with pricing. So the amount of stuff that you can do with data is far more than you used to be able to do with voice or what you would pay for an SMS. So it's actually crazy if you compare what you pay per byte or per megabyte in SMS effectively versus data. In more sort of human terms, the size of the message that you can send on WhatsApp and the richness of the message that you can send on WhatsApp versus what you can send on SMS, WhatsApp just destroys it. So people are switching to alternative services that are much better than what operators used to be able to offer. And they are doing it at a much cheaper rate over a data connection than they used to be able to by using the operator's own services. And that's why we're seeing operators bulk at WhatsApp and you get statements like that they're getting a free ride on their networks and so on.
Yes. Are you referring to the OTC?
Yeah, exactly. The OTT complaints from
OTT,
operators. Yeah,
apologies.
which I mean, it dates back to the days of the launch of Skype. I mean, this is not a new whinge from the operators at all. The thing is though, the growth of data, so operators can earn even more money from data because the demand for data is there, but they can supply only so much at the moment, and they can drop the prices, they can spur that demand, but they lack the capacity on their networks, and that's actually entirely out of their hands at the moment.
So what are the strategies that we're seeing by these telecoms companies? What are they trying to do in order to deal with all of these challenges that we're sitting with?
Well, one of the things they're doing is what they call refarming of spectrum. So spectrum that's really ideal for 2G and 3G is being allocated to 4G or LTE, where government is sitting on that spectrum and not allowing the regulator, or certainly not facilitating the regulator in allocating that spectrum. And that's a massive national crisis that's quite silent, because it doesn't affect people directly. They don't feel it as a crisis, but it really is. It's been something like 5 years now that we've waited for that spectrum to be regulated. So both ICASA and the Department of Communications and Postal Services have a massive responsibility, which they actually have been completely avoiding. That's the one area. So the networks are doing what they can, but as MTN stated yesterday, something like 40% of spectrum is being used for 89% of demand, or something along those lines. And the spectrum that's lying fallow that could be used to both provide better services and to bring down the cost of those services is still completely lying fallow.
I want to go back to the issue of voice, and I'm not sure if you want to maybe comment on what Arthur has said, but voice is declining. Let's get an understanding of trends that we've seen in mature markets versus ones that are still developing. Do we even need to still have voice as part of the business? Is it just dying? We're talking about bots and the future. Are we going to really be using voice?
Yeah, definitely. And even classic voice calls, if the operators can get their quality up to the same level as you can achieve on data, and they're trying with HD voice and that sort of thing. And also, for the most part, when you really need to make a critical call, you're using your operator's infrastructure. You're making a telecom landline call, or you're making a normal cellular to cellular phone call. That is not going to die, just like CDs haven't died. Vinyl is even making a comeback. These old technologies stick around, and they have a purpose. They just account for a far smaller share of the revenue in the end. And you have you have data calls, so it's the kind of stuff that you can do on Skype and WhatsApp. You're going to see, and Google, which has now launched 2 new services that can do this kind of thing. They will overtake that eventually, and operators themselves will offer data calls, I reckon, and that will eventually overtake the normal voice call, but the normal voice call isn't going to die. And it's certainly a sizable chunk of the revenue still today. So it's just in decline, but not dead by a long shot.
If I can just endorse that, if you look at the curves of growth and decline, you see SMS coming significantly down from where it was at its peak a few years ago, and voice beginning that decline. But it's a very long decline, and during that decline, they still represent fairly high revenue. SMS too. SMS is still quite a good business for the networks, partly because they charge so much for it. But SMS, in fact, holds the lesson for voice and data. By keeping SMS at artificially high price levels, they've almost ensured its eventual demise. If they'd been creative about it and found ways, firstly, of enhancing SMS itself, but also bringing the cost down to its real cost, or just a little bit above its real cost, they could have ensured that people will carry on using SMS. Very funny comment I heard yesterday is that SMS is now seen as a lot more intimate than WhatsApp, because WhatsApp doesn't cost you anything, whereas if you send an SMS, people think, well, you've actually paid for that, so you actually care more, whereas SMS used to be seen as the very impersonal kind of tool. So that kind of messaging is what could be leveraged. But you also have to make it a more attractive and appealing service, and you've got to bring down the cost significantly. Even at, let's say, 10 cents instead of 80 cents, people still think, well, they spent 10 cents instead of a fraction of a cent. That's just one side of it, of course. But there are many things you can do with SMS. Voice as well. Voice will remain absolutely essential. But as Jan says, people more and more find the richness of apps like WhatsApp far more compelling than conventional voice. And that's where the networks really have to start being a lot more innovative in bringing all their services into this new rich media environment, instead of trying to keep them in silos, which is what's destroying them.
So is this what we're likely to see come out of telecoms?
Yeah, and our regulator, this is the one area in which they're actually enabling it. So where they're abject failures in the realm of spectrum, they have cut the termination rates. Those are the fees that the operators pay one another to terminate calls. And that kind of sets a lower benchmark, a baseline for what an operator has to charge for a call, right? And so those fees are being forced down. And so that leaves the market a little bit more open to innovation. And so the operators can innovate on price. When it comes to voice, they can do some interesting things on there. But at the end of the day, for the operators to really be able to do anything about this, they're going to need more spectrum. More spectrum means they can look at things like HD voice. More spectrum means they can offer wider coverage. It means they can offer better speeds, and it means they can scale, which means that they can bring prices down. Without the spectrum, none of that's going to happen.
As an investor, I'm looking at the telecoms industry and I'm thinking, we've spoken about quite a few challenges that they're facing at the moment. So would one, take a bold step and still invest in these companies that are faced with all of these, with all of these issues?
If you're looking at revenue growth, then probably not. If you're looking at profitability, then that all depends on how operationally efficient they are. And that includes corporate governance, which at the moment we're not seeing as being a top priority of the operators. They've got to change their corporate culture significantly and avoid these public relations disasters that are bedeviling them at the moment. Every time there's another Nigerian regulator issue or a please call me issue, you see the share price being hammered. And that all comes down to good corporate governance.
Yep, I have to agree there. And they, as long as the corporate governance is in place, they remain a solid investment. But if those basics aren't there, then yeah, it's unattractive. And we see analysts all across the sphere actually encouraging bailing on companies like MTN, and that doesn't bode well for them at all.
Certainly a lot that's playing out in this particular sector. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and giving us the lowdown. Lots of negatives, but again, we need to work on specific things that can really get us over these hurdles that we face with. Thank you so much. A very big thank you to Arthur Goldstuck. He's the Managing Director of World Wide Worx. Jan Vermeulen, he's a technology journalist at MyBroadband. Do note that you can go and get yourself a copy of the magazine. It is available at your nearest store. If you don't want to do that, you can simply go online and have a look at these articles that are available in the magazine. From us, we'll see you again same time next week. Have a fantastic weekend.